many generations do you engage with and chat to? Have you ever found it hard to communicate with different generations? I think sometimes we all can relate to that, particularly when it comes to work. Maybe you've noticed the generation gap when it comes to communication, and that's where we bring in Wendy Demonari. She's a communications trainer and the founder of Work Ready NQ. She says there can be a bit of a disconnect when it comes to effective communication at work across the generations. I asked her about the 5 main generations and their characteristics.
It's the first time in modern workplace history that we've had 5 generations in the one workplace at the one time. And in fact, there is a 6th generation that is coming through, and I'll talk a little bit more about them later. So let's start with the oldest one, which are called the silent or maybe traditional generation. So they are people that were born after 1945 at the end of Second World War. They would be in their late 70s, but a lot of them are still in the workforce. They've chosen to keep working. The next, and we've all heard about the baby boomers, and I'm a late end baby boomer. So they are the group that were born after about 1946 through to 1964, roughly. So they're people who are currently sort of in their late 50s up to their early mid-70s. And occupying a lot of senior positions and still continuing to work on rather than retiring early. Generation X, born between 1965 and about 1980. They're people who are roughly in their early 40s up into their late 50s now. The famous millennials, also known as Generation Y, they are people who were born in about 1981 through to about 1996. So currently in their mid-20s up until their early 40s. By 2030, they're tipped to be the biggest cohort of our workplace, representing about 75% of the workers out there. After the millennials is what is called Gen Z. So they are people in the workforce who were born between about 1997 and right up to about 2012, which doesn't seem that long ago, really. So we're talking about our people who are in their mid-teens up until about their mid-20s. And then now, after the Gen Zers, we are starting to talk about the Alpha generation.
Alpha.
So get ready for Alpha. So the Alpha generation are people who were born after 2012. They're currently, our kids in our primary schools at the moment, but we are expecting that some of them will be entering the workforce in the next 4 to 5 years. So we could end up having 6 generations at the same time in the workforce.
Incredible. And as we spoke about a little bit last week, there is different styles and expectations when it comes to communication. When we look at these generations, what are their values and what's important to them at work?
Okay, yeah, so they do have actually quite distinctly different values. However, there are some that are shared. The silent generation, they traditionally, and they are called traditionalists, they're people who value security, they value stability. In terms of how they like to communicate, they communicate best verbally face-to-face, or perhaps by phone calls, maybe emails. The boomers are traditionally noted as being hardworking, very driven, very ambitious. They value in-person work communication, so they value that verbal face-to-face communication. They also do communicate very well via emails. The Generation X, so they were perhaps the first generation. They're kind of straddle between millennials and boomers, first generation to start embracing the tech world. They desire flexibility in the workforce. They have embraced technology. They do like the face-to-face, but they also like emails and phone calls and texting. Then we come to our millennials. So the millennials and after them the Gen Zers, they have never really known a world without technology. Millennials have a very driven sense of purpose. They do crave feedback and collaboration with people. They are definitely into electronic communication, so videos, texting, emails, direct messaging, social media is what they prefer. Our Gen Zers are people who are very driven by a sense of social impact, social responsibility. They are also very much into electronic communication, quite uncomfortable actually with face-to-face, verbal communication, phone calls, much prefer TikTok, all the electronic styles of communication.
And I will disclose that I fall into the elder millennial category. So I'm a millennial and
You're
don't hate me
excused.
for it.
No, we don't hate anybody.
No, we don't. We just have to focus on the strengths. That's what I'm going to tell myself.
Absolutely.
What are the benefits of working in multi-generational teams, and what benefits does it bring to individuals and teams?
You know, I think there are way more benefits than there are challenges. We hear so much about the challenges and the difficulties. I think we don't hear enough about how good it is and all the benefits that come with working in multi-generational teams. So, look, you know, you've got many heads with many different ideas, many different thought processes, many different ways of operating. So when you have that situation in a workplace that ultimately increases innovation, it increases your ability to problem solve in very creative ways, because you're tapping into a very wide and balanced set of skills there. You've got tremendous opportunities for multi-generational mentoring, for learning. They're talking about things called reverse mentoring now. Reverse mentoring, and this is the beauty of the intergenerational, multi-generational teams, is that you've got mentoring that is coming from the bottom up and from the top down and in all directions. All of this obviously is going to be a big boost to performance and productivity, greater chances you have to learn and grow as well. And when you've got a diversity of thought, a diversity of ideas, then that's ultimately got to enhance the culture of the organisation.
Is there a couple of tips you can share with us about those different communications with those different generations at work?
I think the first thing with anything is to have a sense of awareness of the people you're working with. How do you get that? Well, it's by talking to them, educating yourself, asking them questions, establishing a bit of a relationship, a connection to them, so that it's not just, you know, them over there and us here. So you start to build real connected relationships with people, and that's where, you know, the respect comes in. Being flexible and being adaptable, so keeping an open mind. Communicate your preferences openly. So, look, you know, your boss and your colleagues are not mind readers. Nobody is. And if you don't communicate what your particular communication style preferences are, they just might make assumptions, and they might make wrong assumptions. So, you know, get it out there in the open. It might not always be the case that people can do that. Some types of conversations are better face-to-face than by text. And we all know the dangers of sending stuff by email. But try to make your communications open to others. Challenge and try to dispel those generational stereotypes. Try to encourage as much as possible cross-collaboration with different groups. You can't be expected to know everything, and you shouldn't be. And your particular age cohort shouldn't be expected to know it all either. You might be surprised. You might learn something. And then celebrate those similarities. Celebrate the fact that you can tap into the wealth of knowledge that exists in your organisation, going up, down, and in all directions. Yeah. So I think they're my tips for today anyway. They're my takeaways.
Communications trainer Wendy Deminari for Work Ready Queensland.